again, everybody, and welcome back to Utopia. You know, when people think of recreation in Utah, what's the first thing to come to mind? Skiing? Snowboarding? Of course. Mountain biking? For sure. But fishing is not typically top of the list. Well, it should be. Through the efforts of the Department of Wildlife Resources and due to the scenery that surrounds the fishery, Utah fishing proves top-notch. Over the past year, we spent time with the fishery biologist responsible for keeping the fishing good, and more importantly, restoring ecosystem health. And later, we share highlights from last year's Larry H. Miller Tour of Utah, and train with local Tour of Utah competitor, Rob Squire, who grew up here in Sandy. Now first up, in our feature story, if you like fishing or you like to explore the waterways of Utah, here's Sean King with a fishing tale that you won't want to miss.
Utah, known for the greatest snow on earth and some of the best mountain biking trails in the world. But Utah is also a draw for anglers. Every year, millions of locals and thousands of tourists venture into Utah's wilderness with rod and reel to fish blue ribbon waters.
But we've got everything from the desert to the high mountains, and the fish follow that. We can hike up to the high lakes and fish for nice cool water trout, or you can go down to places like Lake Powell and fish for your bass and your stripers and things like that. So, and everything in between. It's a unique state that has a little bit of everything, in my opinion.
Mike Slater and his team at the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources spend most waking hours maintaining fish stocks in Utah's waters.
As far as restocking different waters, we've got a lot of different reasons or purposes behind that. Some are, we've got a lot of small community ponds, we call it. We're trying to bring the fishing to the public a little bit. That would involve your rainbow trout, putting those fish into a pond, into a setting where people can come and simply catch those fish. Another case, we would go out to the wild and we would collect eggs from, say, a native Bonneville cutthroat trout, take those eggs, rear them for a short period of time, and then take those hatched fish and restock them in places, and that would be more of a conservation purpose. Let's get them reestablished in some of their home ranges and bolster the population. So very different reasons why we would restock some different waters and some species.
Today, we visit 3 locations around the Salt Lake City area where Mike and his team worked this past year: Mountain Dell Reservoir, Jordanelle Reservoir, and Mill Creek. In each location, the process was the same, although the reasons for stocking varied. One reason is to try and reestablish historic populations and restore ecosystem equilibrium. Another reason is to stave off the extinction of native species, as in the case of the Bonneville cutthroat trout.
Years ago, there was a petition to list the Bonneville cutthroat trout as an endangered species. However, through efforts of agencies, individuals, organizations, trying to preserve, trying to create habitat, trying to supplement or expand these populations, it hasn't been warranted. There's enough of a population throughout the state that we don't see it being threatened to be listed anymore. And I really think it's because of efforts like this, where we're going into nature, trying to help things out and expand these populations.
Several years ago, the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources conducted genetic testing analysis on fish found in Little Dell and Mountain Dell reservoirs. They soon determined that these fish were pure native Bonneville cutthroat trout that could have been found thousands of years ago in Lake Bonneville. So, they decided to use this pool as a source for restocking efforts. In order to stock fish, they must be spawned. In order to spawn fish, eggs and sperm must be collected. In order to collect the eggs and sperm, Mike and his team use electricity.
And the best way that we've found that we're using to get these fish or get our hands on these fish is using electricity. A very slight electricity, a pulse, we're able to electrofish, we call it, these fish. Gives us enough time to net them, put them in water, they come right to. It's a non-lethal way for us to sample fish. Once we get these fish to the surface, we'll put them in buckets of water, store them, get them to, let them come to, and then we're going to handle each female individually. We'll strip the eggs from her. Once we're done with that, she goes right back into the stream, into the reservoir. We'll work with them, make sure they're all okay, and then we do the same thing with the male. We'll strip the milt, fertilize the eggs, and then those eggs are then what we call water hardened or prepared to travel to take them to the hatchery where they'll be reared for a month or two until they're maybe a couple of inches in size. We can then go out and supplement various different waters where we want to see these fish recover.
Once a year, since the late 1990s, the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources has collected and spawned the native Bonneville cutthroat trout. Some years they have collected as much as 200,000 eggs, and some years just 50 to 60,000. But their work has proven much more successful than leaving nature alone. While an estimated 1 to 2% of these fish would survive to adulthood in the wild, through this program, the survival rate is as high as 50 to 60%.
But that's kind of where we're at today, is we have lost a lot of the populations of the cutthroat trout, and being able to come in here, collect these eggs, rear them, stock them in different locations, or supplement these other populations is helping us bring those native cutthroat trout back. And we're really excited about where we're at. We've made huge progress or huge strides in making a difference with these fish.
Utopia will return after a short message from our sponsors.